Hello. In this video, I'm going to describe how to work with Jupyter Notebooks. So you'll recall that a Jupyter Notebook was one of the two formats for working with Python, and it's the one that has the code, but also can contain Markdown and other elements. I'm going to describe this from the Jupyter Lab interface that we will access through the Berkeley Data Hub. But there are other ways of working with Jupyter Notebooks, such as, for example, Google Colab, or PyCharm, or VS Code, and they all work more or less the same. So let's get started. Here is the UC Berkeley Data Hub. You probably have access to this if you're with one of those aforementioned courses. You can get to it through this URL, https://cdss.berkeley.edu/datahub. And once you're here, just click on datahub.login. And you can bookmark this page now to get to the Jupyter Lab whenever you like. Now this is the Jupyter Lab. You see on the left here, you have a panel, which is your file browsing system for the Jupyter Lab. I have a single folder and no loose documents. On the right here, we have a launcher tab, and each of these buttons are different apps that we can launch within Jupyter Lab. We're going to be working with this one here, which is the Jupyter Notebooks editor. So go ahead and click on this. And this opens a fresh Jupyter Notebook. You can see that it has a single cell, and that cell is empty. Now, a Jupyter Notebook consists of a sequence or a series of cells, and we can put code or markdown into each cell. A cell can be of type code, in which case it will have code in it, or it can be of type markdown, and we can change the type with this little pull-down menu here. So if I click on this, I can change this cell to markdown. Well, there are also raw cells, but we won't be using those. So now this cell is interpreted as a markdown cell, and now it's back to a code cell. So let's stick with code cells for now. Let's add a little bit of code here. So I'm going to say a is equal to 4. What this little bit of Python code does is that it's going to define a variable called a, and it's going to assign it the value 4, which will be an integer. Okay, now I can add new cells beneath this cell, for example, by clicking on this button, which is to create a duplicate of the cell. So if I click on this button, I get the exact same cell below. Let's say that's not exactly what I wanted to do. I can delete the cell by clicking on the trash can. Okay, these two buttons are for adding cells above and beneath the current cell. So I'm going to add a cell, an empty cell above, and now I'm here again. I'm going to add an empty cell below. And I can also use these arrows for moving cells around. So I'm going to take this cell, I'm going to move it up, and then I'm going to move it up again, or move it down, etc. Okay, now that let's say we've finished creating this little simple bit of code, say I want to execute that code. While I'm highlighted here in this cell, I can go to this button. This is the run button, and it's going to run this cell and advance. And the useful keyboard shortcut here is Shift Enter. So I am going to click on this and notice what's going to happen. Okay, a couple things happened. One, in the gutter here, we got a 1. And what that means is that this cell is the first cell that has been executed by the current kernel. A kernel is just another word for the Python interpreter. So what we have here is that we have the Python interpreter, or the kernel, running in the background, and it's interacting with this interface called the Jupyter Notebook. And whenever I execute a cell, it takes that code, sends it to the kernel, and the kernel processes it. Let's say, oh, the other thing that happened is that we advanced one cell. So this blue bar is showing us which is the current active cell. And by clicking Shift Enter, we executed a cell and advanced to the next cell. There's another way of executing code, which is with Control Enter instead of Shift Enter. And what that will do is execute the current cell, but remain at that cell. Okay, so we'll see use cases of both of those in a second. Let's add some more code. So let's say I say b is equal to 7 or 5, and then I'm going to add another cell below, and I'm going to define c is equal to a plus b. Now I'm leaving spaces here, and that's not necessary. Spaces will not make any difference in Python, so this is exactly the same as this. Okay, and I can also put more than one line of code in a cell. So I am now going to say print C. Recall that print is one of our built-in functions. So it's available all the time, regardless of whether we have imported it or not. Okay, now I'm going to go to this cell. This one has already been executed. I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to press Shift Enter, and then Shift Enter again. And notice what has happened. Here, when I did this one, it defined the variable b, gave it the value 5, and then when I executed this cell, it defined c, gave it the value 4 plus 5 is equal to 9, and then I said print c, and that printed the value 9 beneath the cell. Okay, let's try something else. What if I said c is equal to c plus 1, and then print c? Now, if I execute this, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to execute it with Shift Enter. It prints a 10. But what if I now press on the Control button, keep it depressed, and I'm just going to click Enter several times. Control, Enter, 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 Enter. So you see what has happened. The execution count is increasing, and also the value of c is increasing, because each time that I execute this cell, it increments c by 1. That is, it takes the current value of c, adds 1 to it, and then makes that the value of c. So this presents a little bit of a difficulty, because in a Jupyter Notebook, I can execute cells in any order I want. I can go back here and evaluate this again, or I can evaluate this one, and then I can evaluate this one. And so that introduces a significant possibility of introducing bugs, because I may execute something in a different order. So it is recommended that you use this button, which is Restart the Kernel and Run All Cells. Restart the Kernel means that we are going to take the current kernel that was behind this Jupyter Notebook and kill it. And with that kernel, we're going to lose the current values of A, B, and C, and any other variables that we have defined. And we're going to create a new fresh kernel. Okay, and then run all cells. That means that we're going to start from the first cell and we're going to run all cells in order. This way, our code is completely repeatable and we can avoid such bugs. So let's do that. Restart kernel, please. And now it shows an asterisk, which means it's processing, and now it's over. Okay, the rest of what you can do with the Jupyter Notebook is pretty self-explanatory. We can save the Jupyter Notebook. Let's try that. I press save, and now maybe I want to give it a name that's different from Untitled. So my first notebook, and now here on in the panel, we can see our notebook, and we could also download it. Right-click, context menu, download, and here there are some familiar things that you could do. I can also collapse this panel by clicking on this folder. Collapses the panel. Okay, this is an insert button. We can cut, copy, paste cells. And as I said before, we can also turn a cell into a markdown cell. So let's do that with this final cell, markdown cell. Now, once it's a markdown cell, we can start inputting some markdown. So, for example, we can have a header. This is a level 1 header. And when I execute it now with Control Enter, it renders that header. Double click, get back into the cell. I can have a level 2 header with 2 hash symbols, a level 3 header, etc., etc. Execute that, and you see I have different size fonts. This would just be regular text. Okay, and other things that we can do, for example, a list item 1, list item 2, list item 3, adding this plus sign is rendered as a bullet. Or we could do numbered list item 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and we can do many other things such as insert equations, insert images, hyperlinks, etc. That is not very important. You won't have to do that in any of your exercises. This is just for your own knowledge. Okay, that's about all you really need to know to get started with Jupyter Notebooks. I'm sure you'll pick up many more details along the way, but with this, you're ready to get started and work on exercises for your class.